Hello everyone and welcome to part 4 of this stained glass inspired Seed of Life pattern. In this video we're actually going to finish this piece now, so we've got all our base layers in and we are on to what I call the smooshing layers. So the real word for that is burnishing, where we use a harder pressure to push all the pigments together to create a blended look, but I call it the smooshing layer. So that's what we're going to do today. You'll see that I have had a little practice run before starting filming, because I wanted to make sure that I'd got my colours right. And from that I discovered that it's going to be a better way to work this. So I've gone in and burnished this one, this one, this one, this one and this one. So you can see there's a bit of a difference between the rest of the panel and those. I've also burnished some of the leading. Now when I was doing this, I actually realised it would be better to do the leading first, because then we know exactly where our edges are to work our panels up to. So we're going to do our leading first and then go back to the colours. Right, so I've zoomed in just a little bit more, so hopefully you can see a bit clearer. So I'm using Derwent Artist pencils for this part. These pencils have a very hard core and I find them really good for these last layers. You could also use Derwent Pro Colour is another one that I favour, and Caran d'Ache Pablo would be another good choice. Polychromos, Faber-Castell Polychromos, I think would work okay, but they are a bit softer. So you're really looking for a harder pencil that you can use to really push the pigment about. So for our leading, I'm using Imperial Purple, which is number 2300, and Ivory Black 6700. So we're going to work very much the same as we did before. Let's get my piece of paper there. Now I've been doing this a bit more in sections than I did when I was working before I did the round circles, but I've actually been doing this a bit more in sections. It's quite important with this that you work slowly, as precisely as you can. So it's really just the same as the base layers, but because these pencils are much harder, we're wanting to really sort of push the pigment together. And obviously because these pencils are harder, they do hold a point better, so it makes this detailed bit, or the edging I should say, much easier to do. You should be careful that you don't push too hard and snap the pencil tip. We'll see if I manage to do that on one of these as we go through. Now with this Encasuticbord, I think if you were to add many more layers, you would get a really solid effect where you wouldn't be seeing some of the grain or the tooth of the surface. That isn't really my goal on this. I like the fact that we can see some of the surface. For me, it's part of the piece. You might not like that, and that's fine, and you can keep adding layers here to get rid of the grain. But like I say, I like it as a textural interest, so I'm really just pushing the pigment together enough that it's as smooth as possible without it being sort of obliterating the surface, if you like. I'm actually just going to do this one as well, and then we'll work in. So my pressure is probably sort of medium to hard. Like I said, I'm not pushing super hard because I'm just being careful with the tips of the pencils, but these pencils, because the core is so hard, they will take quite a lot of pressure. Okay, so I'm just going to work this arc now so you can see that. When I did a practice run just to make sure my colours were right, I did the glass panes first, and what I found was I ended up with a sort of white halo around the panels, because I'd been a bit cautious and I hadn't done my colours right up to the edge, and that really started to show when I had burnished, or smooshed as I say, when I'd burnished all the colours in. It really showed that there was a sort of white halo against each panel, which didn't look very good at all. So I decided against my original plan, which was to do the panels first and then do the leading. And I think doing the leading first is better, because then you can see exactly where your edge is and you can get your panes right up against the edge, which looks much better in my opinion. So you can see these layers do make quite a difference to how much it packs a punch. And I don't know why I decided to change tact with this bit rather than going round in the circles. I think it was more of a, just felt easier in my brain somehow to do it in sections, this bit. And it is easier to see really which bits you've done, because it does make such a difference. You can see this halo I'm talking about here and here. Yeah, that became really apparent when I started doing these layers and hadn't gone up to the edge and then needed to backtrack again. So I think this way is much more efficient way of doing it. So I'm just going between the purple and the black, the Imperial Purple and Ivory Black. I'm using the purple first and the black second. So it's the same process as what I was doing with the Coloursoft pencils. We've just changed the pencil brand, and these are much harder pencils. And remember to keep taking your dust off. You'll notice that I'm spinning it to work with my hand, and I really recommend you do that with this, because we want to try and keep these nice shapes in as much as we can. There is going to be some wobbles. I've definitely wobbled in a few places. That's all just, for me, it's all just part of this story. I was such a perfectionist, and I still am in some ways, but I've had to let that go a little bit, because sometimes or most of the time, it takes the joy out of doing anything because it becomes stressful. So just try and embrace the little wobbles and hiccups that happen, because it's all just part of this process. It's part of this piece's story. Right. So I've done that one. So I am dancing about a little bit here, and it's the same for all the leading all over. I'm just gonna go around and burnish all the leading. Yeah, and I can really start to see where some of these halo effects are happening. So I'm going to keep working round on this, and I'm going to put in, exactly as I've just shown you, all of the leading, and then we'll meet back up and I'll show you how to do the glass panes. Okay, so I've gone round and added extra layers to my leading. There will probably be bits and pieces that I want to rework later on, but just for now I'm going to leave it like that and we'll carry on. So we're going to burnish, or smoosh as I call it, all of our glass panes now. So I'll start in the centre petals. So I'm using Derwent Artist's Chinese White 7200 and Lemon Cadmium 0200. So I'm going to start with the white. This is really key that you cover your work now so you don't smudge anything. So nice sharp points. Now we want to be a little bit careful because white can pull in the black, and I must admit that these centre panels can get a little bit mucky. But again, rather than get frustrated or annoyed about it, which I always used to, I try to just see it as part of the story of the piece now. Have a bit more relaxed approach to my art. So we're going to take it up into the yellow as well. And you want to try and work up to the edge of the black if you can. So we want to get rid of the halo effect that can form. We take the yellow and rework that as well. And you'll see what this layer does is push the pigment about. So if we just take this orange layer now, I mean obviously we're going to work around all panes, but just to show you each section. So taking the orange one now, and this is a good example where we've got that halo effect. So using Naples Yellow 0700 and Deep Chrome 0900. So starting with the Naples Yellow. It's the same process as the Colour Soft really. I'm working in elliptical motions most of the time. And I'm using a medium to high pressure, and you can see that it's really pushing and blending the pigments. I'm just going to turn this just so I can work with my hand. This is also your opportunity to smooth out any blends as well, which actually these orange panes do need a little bit of work actually. I've got quite a distinct change there, so this is our opportunity to fix that. So working right up to the edge, just want to make sure there is no halo effect. Again, medium to high pressure, but once I come down to here, I'm feathering again. It is exactly the same as the base layers really, it's just we've changed the hardness of the pencil. You don't want a harsh line here, you want to feather it in. And sometimes it's helpful to go back in with the lighter colour again to fade it up as well. There we go. I can actually, I've just spotted on one of these panels that I did before that there's a little bit of a gap there. So, you know, if you're spotting things as you go along, feel free to fix them while you see them, because I tend to forget. Right, so let's move on to our pink panel. So for this I'm using Rose Pink 1800 and Pink Madder Lake 1700. So I'm actually going to turn it this way. So starting with the lighter pink. Now, if you're using different pencils to me, obviously I've given you exactly the colours that I've used. If you are using different pencils to me or have gone for different colours, the trick with choosing your harder pencils to burnish with is to pick colours that are very similar, if not identical, to your original layer colours. Now, you can go for lighter shades or sometimes darker shades, but you don't want to change the colour too drastically in this situation. Obviously, there are times where you might want to do that, but just for this example, you want to keep the colours as similar as you can, so that when you come to do this blending, you're still keeping the original colours there, because colour pencil is translucent, so you always see a memory of the colours underneath, which is really lovely. But yes, keeping it within the same colours if you can. You know, I really favour the Derwent artists for doing this. I think they're one of the hardest pencils, really, one of the hardest colour pencils on the market. I do use Pro Colour as well. There is Holbein pencils, Tombow Holbein pencils. Those are also very hard. You could try those if you have those. So I'm using the elliptical motions again, and I'm really just feathering, and I'm sort of making decisions as I go along, really. I'm just judging it from what I can see. I sort of dance over the surface, really. I'm quite sporadic, really. I am making logical decisions, but I usually drift off, and I'm just sort of feathering and playing with the colours, really. So let's move on to one of the purple ones now. So for that I'm using Light Violet 2600 and Red Violet Lake 2400. So starting with the Light Violet. Now this was one of the panels where we had a bit of a distinct difference between the two colours, so we just need to bear that in mind. Now I am here applying quite a bit of pressure because we've got a bigger space here. So I tend to find on these smaller panels you get a higher concentration of pigment naturally, because you know it's a lot quicker to fill that space, and I know for myself that I end up doing quite a few more layers comparative to the bigger panels because they are much quicker. And I know I mentioned before that I get a bit overwhelmed by the bigger panels, so I know that naturally I've done more layers on those. smaller panels, which means that they can blend a little bit more easier because you've got more layers of pigment. So when you come to these bigger panels, I tend to find in my way of working that I need to add a little bit more pressure and a bit more pigment to these because they haven't got as many layers comparatively. So we'll go in with the darker colour now and just see how it's looking. Now I'm being quite tentative on this first bit, so my pressure isn't really heavy here. And the whole idea with these panels is just to create an ombre effect, so from light to dark or dark to light. So, you know, I'm just playing with that really. And again, remembering to work right up to that edge. So when I come down to this section, my pressure is quite light. And I know I've spoken about this before with this particular surface, but you can really dance about and squiggle on these because you're not actually seeing any of the strokes I'm doing here on the reflective on the surface. If I was doing this on normal paper, more smooth surface, you would see the fact that I'm really squiggling. But this surface is really forgiving and you don't see that, which means you can work a lot faster and with more pressure. And I find that quite liberating really, because pencil work is very slow most of the time, if not all of the time. So to be able to work quite fast and to just sort of really go for it, I really love that about these surfaces. Okay, there we go. So let's tackle one of these bigger panels. So I'm going to go into this one, show you a bigger panel. Right, so for this I'm using Water Green 4400 and Jade Green 4100. I think that's a 1, yeah, 4100. So starting with our lighter colour again, so we always start with the lighter, we want to get that layer in first. Using a medium pressure, and I'm just using that elliptical stroke. And I'm hoping that you can see the difference, you know, what this layer is doing. And you know, you absolutely can do this just with the Coloursoft pencils as well. You know, you don't have to change to a harder pencil. It's just that I've found over the years that it just gets a better result for me, and there's something really enjoyable about this part of the process for me, where you've got all your base layers in and then you do these sort of finishing layers. Just feels, it's like a nice journey, I suppose, and I really enjoy these layers. I must say though, I do have to do them in little stints though, because they do make my hands hurt sometimes, because I am using more pressure, you know. I'm not using really light layers here like we were before. You know, I am using quite a bit of pressure here to push the pigment about. But like I say, there's no reason why you couldn't carry on using the Coloursoft or the pencils that you used to keep adding more layers to get this really saturated effect. It really depends what you enjoy doing. Like I think I have quite a short attention span, so I like to do things quickly and move on, you know, so this really suits my way of working and my brain. But you know, you might really enjoy that slow meditative way of working, which I also do enjoy. It's just I get a little bit bored sometimes of doing the same thing, so I like the fact that this is a bit faster. But again, I really encourage you to take what I'm showing you and adapt it to you. You know, just, you know, yeah, I really do encourage that, because we are all individual and we all enjoy different things. Sorry, I think I keep moving off the camera here, so please forgive me. I'll try and keep a better eye on that. So this is a sort of medium pressure I'm using up in this higher bit. And then I'll start to feather it down as we go down, and we're merging more into the green. I suppose really if you think light to dark, it's also light to heavier pressure. It works the same way. And you can do it with applying all the same pressure but just adding more. You know, you could do it all with a light pressure and just add more layers to the bits that you want darker, so more saturated. You could do it like that as well, but it would take a lot longer to do it that way. Okay, let's have a look at that. There we go. I'm actually noticing that some of this panel could probably do with a little bit more colour in it. You will start to notice things like that as you go around. You'll notice that something needs a little bit more colour on it, a little bit more saturation, a little bit more burnishing or smooshing, as I call it. You know, you'll start to pick up on that as you go. And I must admit, with these pieces, you could go on layering forever. This surface will take so many layers, which is, you know, amazing. But I sometimes find at some point you have to say, that's it now, we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, there we go. Right, so let's just show you this one, because these ones were a little bit different, weren't they? They were just one colour. So this is quite simple to do, really, this one, because we're just going to add a layer of our water green. Again, remember to try and work right up to that edge, but not to pull the black in too much if you can. There we go. Yes, this one's quite a nice simple one, really. These little panels on the sides, quite simple and easy, because the ombre effect is actually off the panel at this point, so it's just one colour. And I do have to bear in mind that because of that, again, it's all about pigment and saturation. I tend to add a lot more layers to here because to me it's quicker and easier, and it's smaller and more manageable. So I do have to watch that I don't overdo these ones, just because I find them a bit easier to do compared to the other ones. So again, you'll get to know your own little quirks that you tend towards. Just trying to keep hold of the panel here. we are. Right, so should we move on back into the centre? So picking up our white and yellow again. Just going to spin around. I'm actually trying to get down to here to see if we can fix this little blunder that I had. So let's just keep working around a second. So it's all the same principle. You know, I'm doing exactly the same on each one within reason. Obviously I'm adapting to each petal panel depending on what it needs. So this is the white all the way up through the whole petal to blend it all. White is a really good blending colour, but bearing in mind that you're going to be muting the colours a bit by adding white. Now there's definitely been a bit of black pigment pulled into this one. Like I say, I'm not going to stress myself too much about that. Might just quickly work around all these inner petals now. These are quite quick to do, as they're all quite small, and yeah, I do admit that I get a bit overwhelmed by the bigger panels, and I have to really watch that and try and keep my patience. I get a bit impatient sometimes, I think, and I have to try and slow myself down and not rush because it's a bigger panel and I get a bit bored, I think. It's when you need some good music on and get lost in it for a little while. So I'm just feathering into here. Do this last one. So the reason I try and do white or very light colour in the centre of the piece is that illusion of light emanating from the centre. And that is something I do a lot in a lot of my pieces. I always try and keep the centre quite light, or the bit nearest the centre. So you'll notice that on all of these that the edge that's nearest the centre is always lighter. So it gives that impression of light, of glowing. And so when the piece is further away from you, you do get that impression. I've just noticed here I've got a little bit of a gap there and here. So, you know, once you start to look, you'll spot little things to fix. Okay, so back to my oranges. So the Naples Yellow first. This one does a really, I mean they all do, but this one especially seems to do a good job of demonstrating the way that the burnishing happens. So in with the darker, just feather it down. Sometimes when they've got a lot of pigment, you don't actually need to do that much on this layer. It sort of takes care of itself really, because the pigment's already there. You're really just pushing it together, and that can be quite a quick process if you have got all the pigment down. That's why those first layers can be really important that you do that. And there is well, quite a lot of patience involved in this. Like I tend to do on these pieces in little sort of spurts, because like I say, my attention span isn't very long, so I get impatient, so I just make sure that I do it in little spurts, and then I tend to find that I don't rush and get impatient either. I think I might actually just finish these inner ones, so we've got those bits done. So it's still those elliptical motions with the pressure increasing and decreasing depending on where in the panel I am. And I encourage you to really experiment and get a feel for how your hand likes to work and what pressure you like or don't like. And that might change day to day as well. Okay, right, let's get those purples again. I'm itching to get to this bit. Oh, sorry, we haven't done the pinks, have we? Let's not skip a step. Better not skip a step. Okay, so going into this pink here. There's so much space for playing with colour combinations in these pieces. You could do this same piece so many times and do different colours and get really different results that look really strikingly different. And this Seed of Life pattern is one of the first patterns that you learn in geometry. It's one of the sacred geometry patterns, and it goes on to form many other geometric patterns, and it is seen in nature as well. The number 6 is seen in nature a lot, so you know, it's a really lovely pattern to know, I think. And you might find that you go out into nature and start spotting the number 6 in flowers and how things are constructed, which this geometry like lives in us as humans, as part of the natural world. So I love going out into nature and finding these patterns because they repeat the world over. And you can draw a hexagram or hexagon from this as well, a 6-pointed star. Honestly, there's just so much. Once you start doing the fundamentals of geometry, that there is just so much you can learn and create, which is fantastic. Let's carry on with some pink petals. Let's get our way around. I'm really just putting off doing that one, aren't I? Let's be honest. Let's see if we can fix it. Okay, so as you're working, you will see spots that you want to go back and rework. So just keep an eye on those. See, I just want to keep dusting the dust away because that helps you to see. See, I've got a little exposed edge there. Okay. I think some of the leading has lost a bit of its punchiness as well, so I'll probably go back into that as well. But I do like that there's a little bit of texture to this board, and that, you know, I'm not going to fill it completely. I think really because I'd get a bit fed up, to be honest. I want to be moving on to the next thing. That's just me. You know, you can carry on working and make sure you keep those points nice and sharp as well. Right. Something I haven't mentioned actually yet that I'm doing, you might have noticed that I'm doing it, is that I very quickly turn the pencil. So the reason I'm doing that is to keep a point, basically. If you keep turning it, you prolong the time that you have the point. And it's actually something it's such a habit now to keep twisting the pencil every so often. I do it without even thinking about it. So I apologise I haven't mentioned that before, but I suddenly just thought that that is something I do, and you may have spotted me doing it, or maybe you haven't noticed at all, and now you will notice that I'm constantly just, you know, every time I give it a little twist, which just helps prolong how long you've got a point. But these artist pencils do keep their point for a long time, and that is to do with the harder wax content in them. I must admit, I am a real fan of the artist pencils, and even more so since I discovered how good they are for this kind of work. Now, I just want to have a look down here because there's a little bit of the blacks come into this panel, but it's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so let's move on to the purple. We're going to tackle this one here in a minute, but let's just warm up with this one. I've actually just noticed that this one just needs a little bit more darkness in this top bit. Okay, right, let's get going with this one. So remembering to work right up to here, and I'm going in with quite a hard pressure to begin with this one, like I did before. Oh, we've got a little tip's gone. Right, just bear with me, I'm just going to sharpen that. Okay, carrying on. Now we've got a sharp point again. the dust there. So over to the darker red violet. So I'm just starting tentatively with this one again, just because the colours are a little bit different. Okay. So I keep going back to this one because there's a bit of a shadow there. Okay. Obviously we could push the colours a lot darker. It's really up to you how far you want the colours to go. There we go. I tend to be a little bit, I love bright colours, but when I'm working like this I tend not to, my contrasts are probably not huge really. That's something we might do differently in another piece. So let's see what we can do with this one that had my little erasing blender in. I'm hoping that it's not even going to notice, but let's see. So going back in with our darker colour now. So we might have to do just a bit of magic to look like it was always intended to be there. But I have to say, most of my blunders lead on to my most innovative pieces, so there we go. Can we really tell that that was it? I mean, we probably tell a little bit, but once the whole piece is done, it probably won't notice. Let's look at it. Yeah, I mean, it shows a little, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. So let's carry on. So we'll work these ones. And really it's all the same, you know, exactly what I've been showing you. So I think rather than watching every one of the remaining ones, we'll probably go off and just finish these layers and then show you the result, and we'll have a look at the piece and see what to do next. So let me meet you back up. So we're going to finish these two and then go around with our greens, and then I'll meet you back up and we'll have a look at the piece and see where we go next. So I've been round everything now and burnished everything, but now that I'm looking at it again, I feel like I want to just have a go with these lilac petals, of just using some white on them to smooth them out a bit more. Now I haven't tested this out, so this could go horribly wrong live on camera, but I just want to, I don't know, something's not sitting with me right, and I just want to see if just adding a little bit of white although it will mute the colours a little bit. So I'm just using an elliptical motion again. And it is muting them a bit. But it is creating a bit more of a light illusion. I'm just going to turn this a second. Okay, I'm just going to come back in with the darker. Sometimes when you add a layer of white, it allows those colours you put on top to be more luminous. It gives them a bit of a boost. Which can be really nice. So I just wanted to try that out on here. There was something about these bigger ones that just, I don't know, I can't describe it, it just wasn't sitting with me. Okay, I actually think that's really helped, so let's just try it on another one. So this was Chinese white, sorry I should have said that earlier, but Chinese white artist pencil. And I'm using quite a hard pressure here. I'm trying to really push the pigment about, blend it in or smoosh it. I don't know if it was because this sort of bit didn't have the luminosity that I was after, or so back to that darker purple. Really just trying to create that contrast of the light to dark. Okay, let's just have a look at that. Yeah, I think that is better. You can see a bit more of a light to dark going on there. So, you know, don't be afraid if you look at your piece and, you know, I hadn't planned to add white to this, not at all. But sometimes I get, you know, I need to change my plan a little bit to get a better result, you know, so don't be afraid to do that. Which is partly why I wanted to show it to you live and get my live reaction, because, you know, we're all just learning as we go along, really. I think we are. So I am working in broadly elliptical motions, but I'm also sort of working in curved lines as well, just to try and really pull the pigment about. We now compare the top to the bottom. I think that has made quite a difference. I'm just noticing it's got the halo effect there. Yeah, I think that is nicer, and in fact I'm kind of tempted to do it on the pink as well, to be honest. Is that going to be too much? Let's just see. See where the colours are, you know, not so different from white, quite pale. You can end up just adding the white and not needing to do any more. Yeah, so I don't really feel that there I need to add any more pink in. I might change my mind, but because you have got that sort of very light pink at the bottom, you can get more of a fade in that can work really nicely. Yeah, I think that's just finishing those off nicely. Like I say, I could decide to go and do some more darker pink in here if I wanted to. Like I say, sometimes it's hard to know when to stop, really, because there's so many possibilities. I could go on to do some pattern work in these, add some different detailing. Like a lot of stained glass has beautiful colour streaks in it, and that is something I'm going to have a look at in another piece, not in this one, but in another piece, and because I think that would be a challenge to have a go at. Okay, I have got a bit of a halo from the black there, but won't worry. So I might actually just add a little bit of the darker pink into the very sort of points, just to, yeah, that's nice. So just to bring that darker. So I'm really looking now just to enhance the ombre effect, you know, the light to dark effect. feathering it down into there. Excellent. Right, so let's just pull those pinks out a bit more. So we just need to finish these other petals. I'm probably not going to touch the orange because I think that will mute it too much. And I'm thinking of leaving the background to give a bit of a contrast between the Seed of Life and the background, to try and bring the Seed of Life forward and push the background back. We'll reassess once we've been round. So I am working quite quickly really, and I'd be working this fast if I was doing this off camera as well. Okay. Right, so one last purple one to go. Okay, let's have a look now. Okay, so I think we're getting pretty close to being finished with this piece. You might just want to have a look over your piece, decide if there's anywhere you think you want to rework. There might be places where, you know, you think the leading could do with a little bit of defining, you know, so have a look at your piece and see if there's anywhere that you think needs a little bit more saturation, you know, more layers. You know, that's really up to you how far you want to take it, you know, so that sort of thing. But I think that's you know, as far as we'll go with this tutorial. So I hope that you enjoyed creating this stained glass inspired Seed of Life with me, and I really hope that you enjoyed the process and learn a little bit about what you like to do or don't like to do as well, and what works well for you and what doesn't. But thank you so much for joining in, and I look forward to joining you on another tutorial.